Everybody, I'm Scott Allen Miller. Today on Sam IT, we're going to talk about the RAID level that everyone talks about, RAID 5. RAID, of course, redundant array of inexpensive disks. RAID 5 descends from the legacy RAID levels that we talked about in our legacy RAID conversation. 2, 3, 4, and then 5. 5 is specifically an extension of RAID 4. The two of them are extremely similar. In fact, they use the same parity calculation, they use the same block level for that parity calculation. But unlike RAID 4, which had a dedicated disk that handled all of the parity and other disks that handled all of the user data, RAID 5 puts the parity striped evenly across all of the disks so that it's able to do more even workloads and move everything around, so it's a bit more efficient and actually just slightly more reliable. It has better wear and tear and performance characteristics. For example, and this is important because RAID controllers are dramatically faster than disks, especially in the pre-SSD era, that we would spend most of our time waiting on a disk, and anything we could do to increase the amount of work that a disk was able to do for us would speed us up dramatically. If you were doing a read operation off of a RAID 4 array, and let's say you had 5 disks, you could do the read operation off of 4 of those disks. The 5th one would have to be idle, because during read operations there was no reason to hit the metadata, and so that disk would have no purpose. It would just sit there. With RAID 5, if we're doing the exact same operation off of the exact same disks, all 5 disks would be able to participate at the same time because all 5 of them hold data. Now, it does require that the efficiency be a little bit shifted. It's not exactly a 25% gain in performance in that case, because the disks do have to skip over the parity data that is hidden throughout their storage areas, so it does cut a little bit into sequential reads and writes, but that's pretty inconsequential overall compared to just having more disks able to participate at any point in the array. The time it takes to skip over that is trivial compared to having an entire disk sitting idle. Because of this, RAID 5 was the leap that went from RAID 3 being usable, RAID 4 being pretty good, to RAID 5 being pretty solid, and it got adopted a long time ago as the single disk parity RAID type that would dominate indefinitely. In fact, after all these decades, we have no other single parity bit style storage that has ever attempted to unseat RAID 5, and it's unlikely that we ever will. RAID 5 will probably carry that type of striping to the end of time for RAID, because RAID probably doesn't have that much time left anyway, so it's the way that we're going to go, most likely. Of course, some great invention, mathematical invention, may come in the future that changes that, and we will wait and see. But from what we know about the industry, RAID 5 is going to reign supreme in this style until we're no longer using RAID. Now, we're going to have a separate talk about the safety concerns with RAID 5 because this gets very complex and it's worthy of a completely separate discussion. But before we could talk about that, we must know what RAID 5 is, and so that's why we had this conversation. It is single parity striping that descended from RAID 4 without a dedicated parity disk. So if you're doing single parity on your RAID, RAID 5 is what you want. It's quite often that you don't want that, but it is very useful, especially today with smaller SSDs. We're finding a resurgence of RAID 5, and it still has a lot of life left in it, but we need to understand what it is, and then we'll have another talk about when it's appropriate to use it. Thanks for joining me. Remember to like and subscribe, and any comments, you can put them below. Please do not use this thread as a conversation starter for reliability and safety concerns on RAID 5. That's a huge topic all by itself. We will make a separate video for that. And coming up next in our RAID series will be RAID 6, and I bet you can guess what that will be.